Welcome to Preaching That Matters, a place you can find apostolic Pentecostal preaching, a place where all generations can be fed with the Word of God. We hope you enjoy.
I'm sure by now most of you are aware there is an extreme controversy going on in campus on some of the stuff that I have been teaching. And I'm going to try to deal with that perhaps today a little more in depth. My primary focus is on abortion today. Alright, maybe this is really bad for a few minutes. There's a big little scripture involved. I don't want to talk to two of you. The Bible says in giving our wisdom that we need to get understanding also. I do have the principle that we need to take to heart. We need to search out these subjects, issues that affect our society as ministers of the Word of God. You very conscious sometimes, someone who's has had an abortion or is thinking about an abortion. And that is the purpose of this teaching, is to give you the best knowledge on Scripture, so you can face your moral absolute time. Okay, to form some understanding on this, let's begin by turning to Psalms 139, 13 through 16. And I realize you're arguing immediately at the contrast about this being predestination or foreordination. That's not only choices that I have in this kind of a scripture. But I've got another choice. I'm teaching. It's irrelevant whether it's predestination or foreordination. Okay, it says, "For thou hast possessed my reins." In the Hebrew, the word possess means erected, or created. It's David speaking about God, what God did. He formed the life from the womb. God created or erected his innermost being, his reins. Thou hast covered me in my mother's womb. And so if you can understand how it's being fenced in behind the silver, in the natural sense you can understand that it's being fenced in by the silver. We'll drop down through here just a little bit. It says, "Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect." The unperfect one means an unformed man, as in an embryo. "And in thy book all thy numbers, and book first in the place where it is recorded or inscribed." God has a book that he keeps, that he records and inscribes, and the cloud in the room were written books in continuance to a fashion when as yet there is none of them. God in his book engraved, prescribed, and prescribed everything the child in the room was to do. Keeping this kind of a principle in mind, I'd like to ask you to draw your attention to Ecclesiastes 11:5 says that God formed the bones in the womb. We need to try to be a natural life that we take care of all this business. But we don't. God is still the creator of that. God is the one that makes the decision at conception as whether or not it should be alive. Ecclesiastes 12:7 also goes on to that, saying that God gives the spirit. Okay, at what point does God give the spirit? Is it the first breath of the baby as he comes out of the womb? There is a parallel that some people like to draw between Adam and his creation and the breath of life that he received and the baby's first breath at birth. I'd like to draw your attention to another thing, the fact that there is no parallel there. There's no parallel between the life of a child in the womb and the life of Adam. Adam was created by the hand of God, and the breath of life was going into him. Before that, there was no life whatsoever in the baby, or in Adam. In the baby, there was life from the beginning, from conception. Life never ends. It's a scientific fact that we back up our belief in the Bible that life ends, but life never begins. It's continuous process. It's passed on in the womb, in the seed of heaven. Is that clear? So there is no parallel between Adam's first breath. Nothing magical happens at the breath of earth. The baby is breathing in the womb. James 10:26 tells us that the body without the spirit is dead. If the body did not have the spirit of life in it, it would be dead. There would be no life there whatsoever. You have it as known as a stillborn. Psalm 51:5 also goes further to teach us that the transgressions of Adam were passed on at conception. It was in the womb that he was formed and wicked. It was not at birth. When we see the New Testament to verify the teaching, we can ask ourselves, where is God manifest in the flesh? Does anyone know when God was manifest in the flesh? Acts 1:18 says it's at conception. That's when God manifested himself through the womb of Mary. And he made a transition to earth at that point. Why didn't he come at the first breath, if that's true? Why didn't he inject right from the child after he received his spirit? Why didn't Jesus come at birth? But he came in conception. Because Philippians 2:5-8 tells us that it was in the womb that he took upon himself the form of a servant and was made in the likeness of men. Galatians 4:4 also tells us that it was conception that God sent forth his son, made of a woman. There's no distinction you ever find in the New Testament as the child within the womb and a newborn infant. For example, in Greek scholars, excuse me if I don't pronounce the word properly, but the word glucose is the word that's used in Luke 1:41-44 for the babe that was in the womb, John the Baptist being in the womb, and reached the joy at the salutation of Mary. And yet the same author uses the same word to describe a newborn infant in Luke 18, verse 15, when these infants were brought to Jesus, so he could bless them. There's no distinction made between the residents, they called it the prenatal or postnatal. They called it the baby. In Scripture. Psalm 127:3 tells us that the children are a heritage to the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is his reward. Now, I could go a lot further with these kind of scriptures. A lot of scriptures, but I like to turn to something a little more specific, and that is that abortion is a violation of the sixth commandment of God. Thou shalt not kill. In the Hebrew, that means thou shalt not murder. The Bible doesn't say thou shalt not abort. The Bible also doesn't say thou shalt not shoot somebody in the head with a gun. It doesn't enumerate the different ways that you can kill. The Bible says thou shalt not murder. Thou shalt not shed innocent blood. The blood of Abel cried out to God. We have 1.5 million babies a year in the U.S. alone, 60 million worldwide. Incidentally, these babies all have blood. They have blood. And I'll show you in a slide later. The killing is killing, and the how we do it is not the important thing. The fact that God commanded that we didn't do it is the important thing. The principle is more absolute. We need to take a stand on it. Abortion is not the issue that we face today. I want you to understand that. Abortion is what we're talking about, but it's humanism, a manifestation of humanism in the law. We live in a current pluralistic society, and the law constituted by all the points of view. Our court systems are battlegrounds right now between biblical principles and humanistic principles. Our courts have made a lot of bad decisions recently because of this. Before we move away from the biblical principles, before we away from that, our laws are founded based on biblical principles. All lawyers are required to have a theology degree in the early years of our country. The decisions they come up with recently are unpredictable, they are inconsistent, they are contradictory. A good part is that we don't carry very much voice in the U.S. Not because we've had enough people that still believe in moral attributes of God. Because here, of course, we don't have the right to legislate morality in the world. We are going to decide the kind of atmosphere that we live in. If we can't legislate morality in the case of abortion, we have to legislate morality in the case of euthanasia, mercy killing. We have to legislate morality in anything. Every law legislates morality is either going to be God's or man's. And it's going to be up to us to decide by voting our opinions through vote and having and keeping our moral absolute, not being swayed by situational ethics and value clarification and other things that humanism teaches. And I was in the book recently, America Betrayed, it talks about the Christians that have been humanized. Those Christians are humanized because the schools and things like that that come into the church, through the public schools. And then there are converts, like myself. I've been in the church 3 years. And they're converts. I've had nothing but humanistic stuff my whole life. Now I'm trying to Christianize myself to the principles of God, being down to the basics, the morals, that God said is right. I'm trying to replace those things that humanism has taught me. And that's what the Christ I believe without a duty. to defeat humanistic laws. I believe we need to step out against it. We need to say the out that ineffective Christians were good for nothing if we try to fit in man. Cast out, try to fit in man. You know what I teach? In the same place that the light, if our light doesn't shine, the Lord will stumble in darkness. It's getting darker and darker and darker. We need to have a revival in the laws also. I realize we need to learn first. We need to keep the moral attributes of God alive in our lives. It helps us in our own living conditions. It would be good to see a reversal in our school system. I believe it's starting to turn that way. President Reagan has done a great job of overcoming all of these humanistic laws and cutting a lot of federal funds away from these humanists. But every institution is involved in like Planned Parenthood and those kind of things. They're involved in low population and family planning. It's humanistic. They got their hands out in government money, every one of them. And they teach values that we do not believe. I believe it's time for us to take a stand on it. One man said that we're not required to take a stand. We're not required to take a stand as man. I don't believe it's a church teaching that we have to take a stand on the human situation that comes along. But I believe the Bible gives us the principle that we need to take a stand. We're going to move into the slides today. These people here are not elected officials, they are appointed officials. They maintain the office under the humanistic president. We have laws before this in practically every state. There are about 6 states we have very little law in against abortion. But we have laws by elected officials in every state. And these men who can find themselves to overcome every one of those laws on a rape case. And we will talk to you in depth on the rape case. In 1970 in New York, we deleted all the laws. This is prior to the decision. New York deleted all the laws on the statute book for 28 weeks gestation and below, and they allowed abortion at this time. One New York hospital reported an increase from 2 abortions only to 5,000 cases. This is part of what we're going to see happening. One of the reasons of the decision that we keep made. The court, in its decision, not saying abortion to hard cases such as rape and incest, which was before then at the time, like the humanistic philosophy of birth control and population control beyond. After a year before they made this decision, the United States was at 0 population growth and has been ever since. In case you believe that we're overpopulated, it's supposed to live in nuisance. The court made a couple of following things highlighted. Things were knowledge, it did not know when human life began. It required that it favored viability, which is about 28 weeks gestation. Viability means capable of living. They didn't know when life began, so they could decide when to end it. Second, it ruled that a child was an aggressor or an intruder and can be expelled. The child didn't really run. It didn't intrude and it didn't aggress. Three, the court stated that only viable human beings have the capability of meaningful life may but need not be protected by the state. Capability of meaningful life. That's how we get the laws that allow babies after not to birth because they have Down syndrome to be left alone. Because they have to have meaningful life to exist. But those that need not be protected. First thing the court did is that they denied the legal personhood of the preborn. The court stated that the unborn child is not a legal person, is the property of the owner, who may do with it as he pleases. Incidentally, that same statement was found prior to the Civil War on the decision of Judge Scott decision during the slavery action. It was a free decision. As early as 1795, in our U.S. laws, there was a time paid to the personhood and legal rights of an unborn child, and the court has consistently went along with the original decision that the child in the womb has the right. in 1972, they changed that. This side here, these are legal at the part of the case. The American Indians do not have legal personhood even though they're legal. This president, this kind, that's not clear right now. Okay. Okay, the American Indians received their personhood in 1867. Black Americans received their personhood 11 years after the Civil War. It wasn't immediately after the American Republic voted in the 13th and 14th Amendments to the Constitution. Of course, we know about the Jews and the Gypsies and the Holocaust, and some kind of people history of the Americans, and what we need is a Constitution to remember. Not just the Supreme Court reversal. If the Supreme Court reverses now, it can reverse again 10 years from now, and we're going to come again. Second thing we did is they authorized the private killing of freedom. What rule within the right to privacy? Within the right to privacy. There's a basic constitutional right of the mother to terminate a pregnancy. The father allowed across the country. Now I have the right to control my own body and reproductive rights. The problem is that if the body was under control, they wouldn't be near the problem that it is today. And citizens of a free society have responsibilities. We get mixed up sometimes between rights and responsibilities. A free society has responsibilities. We are responsible for our acts and liable for any injury that we cause. That's law. Pregnancy is predictable and the cause is known. Two persons conceive a new life are responsible for that life. Third thing they did is they took a compelling interest in the mother's health. They really didn't take a compelling interest in the mother's health. They really took a compelling interest in the government. In the participation of the one-world government. And humanism in life. Health runs the gamut from physical complications to social well-being of the mother. 98% of all the abortions, nearly 1.5 million a year, are for social reasons. Social, economical reasons. So we see that only 2% that are done for other reasons. Medical reasons, psychological reasons. Dr. R.J. Hepperman, speaking to the American College of Surgeons, states, everyone who performs a therapeutic abortion is either ignorant of modern medical methods of treating the complications of pregnancy or is unwilling to take the time to use them. Because of advancements in medical field, many major hospitals have not performed a therapeutic abortion in 2 or 3 decades. It's not common. Congressman Dr. Ron Paul, the Liberty 4,000 lady, stated, I personally never came across the need to even entertain the thought of a therapeutic abortion. For the health of the mother, what can I imagine the scalable case of the doctor being forced into a crisis and making a decision of whose life to spare, mother or baby. Such decided views have come from several research meetings and TV. Let's face it, it's not a commercial appeal. Before the court, we had the rape case, and they brought up incest, they brought up mortality of backstreet abortions, and they brought up the health of the mother. So the facts are, and you will see, the facts, it happens very rarely in any one of those cases. Not 1.5 million abortions worth a year. Medically, there is no justification for abortion. This is what we end up doing in the law. Abortion legal, all 50 states, the entire 9 months to help. We're getting, right now, we're getting 39 states that have put as much restriction on abortion as they can. Texas, since the 17th of December, has been moving towards doing the same thing. They're trying to restrict abortion as much as possible. This is the second, because there's only 16 decisions that have come out before the U.S. Supreme Court, and we're not going to go into all of them. But I've been looking at because Planned Parenthood has got 4 of these up to the Supreme Court. This one here says that as a parent, you are powerless to be informed, to intervene, or to sue from resulting harm or death to your child. This is against an abortion. So if the father has no right to protect his unborn child, and you have the right to pay for the abortion, legally you can be stuck for that. Planned Parenthood is an organization concerned with world population crisis. Planned Parenthood is a humanistic attack against the family, and they are anti-God. In total, this particular decision in 1977, 210,000 abortions were performed by Children, 10 heavy facts about sex. This is number 3. Most people are heterosexual. Some people choose to be homosexual or bisexual. A few adults choose not to have sexual relations, which is okay too. We have no right to condemn a person because of his or her sexual preferences. Letting yourself be bothered by fear of homosexuality in yourself or others is a license. I don't thought for a value system. So we do that. Another one, same comic book. Now remember, this is a comic book class, so the kids can really read it either. This is number 10. Studies are so, seriously, I can't even read them, they're doing the children. Teenagers who are afraid to get help because parents might be upset should seek counseling at a local town center or at a county or hospital family county center. They're telling them that. Yes, this is what they're doing. Planned Parenthood is anti-family, anti-child, anti-God. Here's another. I want to read this one because this is my age group, our age group, in fact. It states, this one here compares the Chicago area text, which is accompanied by a cartoon caricature of religious leaders. And she states, kids in school. Because some people, some religious and semi-religious groups dominated by elderly women simply cannot deal rationally with sex. They can't talk about it rationally, can't think about it rationally, and above all, can't give up the power of controlling other people gives them. They control other people through sex. That group can't relate certain sex groups. But I didn't realize I was an elderly man yet. The next thing that came along is how they were 28 weeks gestation. The folks that kind of switching how it was, and coming around, they check that down and basically what it does is allow anybody on. Every time you know, anybody, every time, for any reason. That's what it is. Viability itself is measured as sophistication of the external life support systems of knowledge and ability of the doctors, nurses, and laboratories around the baby. It is not a measurement of the baby himself. The child here is 21 weeks gestation. It's been alive. Sometimes it's 10 years old. Sometimes it's a genetic handicap or any other time she's a normal, healthy little girl. But what is considered viability at 28 weeks gestation is that the related percentage of the babies that can live at that point. All babies can't live at 28 weeks gestation. I want you to think that. There's very high mortality rate, many premature births. The law establishes a conditional value ethic. They consider us a biological society. This decision is made illegal. The big to kill the time, the small to kill the weak. The conscious to kill the unconscious, and more perfect to kill the less perfect. Responsible lawmakers have always agreed that hard cases may die alive. This is one of the laws. The question, is this a human law? This question is what it goes throughout the rest of the teaching today. They don't have to make a decision about what human life is. That's a big name. This is a big question to people. Life versus a unique individual life. There is a difference between the life of a sperm cell and the fertilized ovum, or fertilized egg. Sperm cells denote life, not independently. It shows a life of the father. It will last approximately 48 hours outside the body and in the womb of the mother, and all as long as it will live. The sperm cell is genetically identified as the cell of the father's body. If a sperm cell fails to fertilize, it doesn't die. It cannot reproduce itself, it has no life independent. The same is true with the female ovum. This is a zygote. This occurs in the sperm and the ovum gland. This becomes a new, living being. The single-cell egg is distinct genetically from either the body of the father or the mother. Everything that you are today, right now, you once were, and is continuing in the Bible. Dr. Jerome Largin, professor life begins at fertilization and is continuous. Like I said earlier, life actually begins. You have to know it's outside of that, no one's independent of it. And it will continue interleading or extraluting. It simply continues until death. The violet contains 46 chromosomes, 30,000 genes, and 1 cell. It will determine after it makes its genetic code change. It will determine everything that you will be, your height, your shoe size, your hair color, your eyes. It's all resident. Not only that, resident in that single-celled zygote is also the amniotic sac, the placenta, all there. To assist you in your life. You produce all, mom doesn't produce anything. She adds nutrition in your life. The fertilized egg is not just a potential human being. It is a human being with potential. 46 chromosomes, 30,000 genes identify it as a human. And there's some other people. This is how it is, this is how it is, and one side is 30 billion cells. This is how the cells identify. Work and care. There are 8 cells identified by implantation. Implantation is 8 cell organs of your life have occurred. 30 of them have occurred by 8 weeks. Only 41 have occurred by birth. They're really not complete in the sense of being a complete whole human being unless you're complete at any one stage at the time. And then 45 goes by birth, and that would be a life in computer that you go through. Your life is a continuum. From conception of no human being, 18 days the heart begins to beat occasionally. 20 days the foundation of the entire nervous system are in place. 24 days the heart is beating regularly. 30 days the regular blood begins to flow. That blood in there is not the blood of the mother. It is blood that the child has produced and passed to the blood type is determined by the father, not by the mother. At 42 days you have a complete skeleton. 42 days, the electrical brainwaves can be recorded. 49 days, the fingers, the toes, the ears, the feet, and consequently, the child has 49 days and will return to life. 56 days, all the organs are functioning. At 12 weeks, you breathe fluid. At 5, you second sun. And at 10, nothing will develop. At 5 or 12 weeks old, nothing will develop. She is complete and whole, looking at the other. So this improvement becomes here on this set of cells and family, whether or not he's alive, whether or not he's human, whether or not it's complete, and whether or not it's saved. That's certified by the abortion. Abortion is, based on the man, is a $700 million industry for financial profit. It is not a simple procedure, it's not done, it's not medically sound, it's not beneficial to the mother, nor humane to the child. The baby takes your body, you can take your eyes, you need to get up and leave, and you can leave. This is an insert question. The reason I'm saying this is because some people will accuse me of trying to develop emotional feelings in some ways. This is really no different than the humorous going to the court and talking about how many weight victims there are, getting pregnant, and incest, and all this kind of stuff. This only emotional abuse. There is a difference, though. This is really happening right now. The statistics are really here. It wasn't ignorant. The constitution is running up a little emotional feel, that's fine. I believe we're talking about abortion, we're not talking about throwing carrots out of the ground. What we're looking at is abortion. The word complications and pregnancy in the abortion, if it's discovered early enough, they try to do an insert stop. This is here for that's why the head is not impact the rest of the body. They're ready to go in and diet, the kill, and push our head out. The three basic types of sexual abortion, the DNC and the DNA of AOC and the 25th or 510 way, that will deal with these and all the information about these, the dilation of the kill out and the scraping of the uterine wall, or the putting part of the baby, pushing part of the baby to get the unintended process fetal matter. Powerful conception out of it. Organs don't know euphemism. What we're talking about now is a baby. It's not just a powerful conception. That's a kind of pieces here at 10 weeks per station. You can see a hand, 2 arms, 2 elbows, this week. It's open. It's not a squad, it's prototype. DNC is including a week with CNS near the CNS and Captivated Park. The DNE to be performed at the 18 weeks gestation. One of the days we can't analyze the 10 weeks gestation. So it can be performed up to 18 weeks gestation. The instrument is quite similar to pedipallic acute, the bones are calcified at this time, and it requires the long-term surgery. Some of the surgeries bad arms, legs, that are from the whole face, the head, the back, and the leg. And if they look down on it, they can't see what they're doing, and they just pull stuff out. There was in 1978, 1,238,930 babies aborted by suction going through a DNA. Another type of abortion is cesarean amniocentesis. This is done from about 4 to 4.5 months gestation on. The child is going 2 hours to extract by suction at a time. Long needle is inserted through the abdomen wall into the embryonic sac. There, a high salt solution is positive. The baby begins to breathe the salt solution in. One of the babies in the bottom is in the mouth. And from 24 to 48 hours later, the mother goes into labor. And during this time, the baby has convulsions and will be having hemorrhages. And you get to feel all that. This baby dies, but you can feel it. And it's 24 to 48 hours later, the baby is gone. Some of them have been around for something, but some of them you don't know how much to start the conversation when the mother goes into labor. This particular type of abortion is illegal in other countries at the time. They've been using abortion for 20 years, so we don't use this method of abortion. It's dangerous to know. Because you can realize it over time. So they'll breathe and they'll cry. This child here is at 4.5 months gestation. This is a salt program again. There are 50,000 babies performed a year in the U.S. For those who have been to Vietnam or experienced in the military, wartime, which is very much like the Vietnam, but it's got a large blood vessels to the surface of the skin. The first is the effect of the salt, circulating brain from power all over the skin. Subcutaneous nerves, which carries blood back, so sometimes the big blood vessels appear all over the head. This child here doesn't seem to be as bad when you look at it. Next type is a prostaglandin abortion. Prostaglandin is just a hormone that is injected into the embryonic sac that causes the mother to go into a premature labor, and it's a very extreme labor, and then kills the child at birth. If it's a young child, this particular child here is 7 months gestation. It's analyzed in 1974 instruction film on how to do abortion. The doctor got the first because he wasn't kind of honest. And the doctor said he had to because it's fetal damage. No doctor's ever been convicted. A doctor has been convicted of owning a third jail time or owning it. So maybe somebody did that a lot of time. 1938, 18,870 of these were performed. So it's a big time of this type of abortion is that you do have a lot of, you can have a lot of birth at the time of the gestation to life. The hysterectomy abortion is performed during the last 3 months of pregnancy. This is identical to a C-section. The only difference being in a C-section, they save the child. In hysterectomy, they put the child in a pan at bedtime and put them out to laying down. This is where Hillary's got in the bucket next to them. All these babies can breathe, they can move, they can talk, and they can. That's really true. It's a wicked high cleansing. It's an 8.5 months gestation baby. This child here is to be wedded. After this is one in this child. So there's no reason for the outside people arguing with there's no reason for it. It wasn't legitimate. If the child was not trained by together. You have to remember these children don't have to be wedded. Because the innocent lives in our society. This lady here was found around with four others, incinerators who were caught in the bag for the burn. May 8, 1924, Dallas, Texas, several hundred babies were died from the price room behind the local abortion clinic. In 1982, living in Harris, California, another shipping container landed by an abortion clinic was found to contain 16,733 fetal carcasses. And I think I recently heard about ours in Texas having a bad problem with ours going around the city carrying fetuses. Next stop is the dump for research. Planned Parenthood says in cases in Colorado, referring to abortion is a relative statement. We've had things your attention a couple of times as far as miscarriage and premature birth. I thought he was specific about the yesterday contaminated along with this. Chances are doubled of miscarriage in the first trimester abortion. There is a tenfold increase in second trimester abortion in miscarriage in people. And there's also a slight increase in fetal pregnancies in the third round. In premature birth, studies show that 40% increase after one abortion and 30% increase after two. Premature birth is the primary cause of infant death and one of the leading causes of mental and motor retardation. A 4-year study sponsored by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare showed that prematurity is 57% higher among 25 million whose first pregnancy was aborted. And then, of course, we also have a mortality rate that's considered, and there's a lot of other studies that figure in here. For procedure, we found a C-section by that time. Let's just go on this. This is from Florida. This is just a study abortion from the Florida State Hospital. The largest baby here during 20 months gestation. We look at other medical complications. Now, these complications are all, we just don't have the time today to go through them all. But the pathological complications, research indicates that abortion increases problems related to stress and psychosis and creates problems that did not exist previously. One of those problems is guilt over abortion, is the most common of all the options. Anxiety, depression, sense of loss, anger, and deterioration of self-image is common. Psychological side effects threaten a woman's interpersonal relationships and help people emotional stability. Some of the women interviewed reported nightmares, flashbacks to their abortion experience, and imaginations of their aborted children speaking to them. Mothers are not the only ones that suffer with psychological side effects. Fathers of aborted children and medical personnel also have similar problems. Health Education Welfare study showed 75% of the pregnant women in the study group had another abortion within a year. Some of the time they heard on their 20.5 persons. There's nothing to change the condition or the attitude that caused them to abort in the first place. Identify what's blessed within the person. You see there that all your passions and all your other stuff. Each day in America alone, over 4,400 babies are aborted. That's when they come from. Medically, contraceptives that prohibit implantation of the blastocyst, which is the second stage of conversion from zygote to blastocyst, and when he embeds into the uterine wall, he becomes an embryo. Alright? Contraceptives that prohibit implantation of the blastocyst into the uterine wall are not considered abortion medically. I'm not talking about not breaking up the reproductive cycle from the zygote to the blastocyst stage and not allowing it to implant. It is abortion in nature. It is not an abortion. Technically, abortions dictionary terminology of abortion is the removing of a child from getting alive in the womb. Certain types of contraceptives, incidental contraceptives, meaning against conception, against conception. It may work for anybody's function, interrupting the reproductive cycle after it has begun. Now, the church takes no stand. No stand is that the church takes no stand. The UPC takes no stand for or against contraceptives. It doesn't take a stand either way. Second, the church has taken a stand against abortion. You don't have to be in agreement with that. You have to take that out yourself. I am not teaching doctrine here. I am not teaching a religious dogma of the church. I'm trying to present to you the findings that I have made in how some contraceptives work. That's the part that I need to clarify. I'm trying to present to you for your decisions in the future how some contraceptives work. They don't know how to decide. Choices, I believe, are made after consideration of all the facts. If you're going to make a decision, then binary one-sided is a failure to I don't believe you need to be offended by the things that I'm going to present here. If I'm wrong, blame me. Biologically, I believe interrupting the reproductive cycle is wrong. And I can understand my opinion. I believe it's wrong from the time of zygote on, from the time that you got life into the world. That's my opinion. How do you do? I don't know if overnight if you can actually, and medical studies agree that it does not prevent fertilization, but it does destroy the immunity of the healthy baby by preventing. It prevents implantation in the womb. It is not an abortion in the family. It prevents implantation of the continuing or the reproductive cycle. One life to tell a child that it was used, not all about it, anybody that uses this type of method. But it's a few cycle that will work out. This is why everybody is something that I care about. And I respect your opinions. Do not get me wrong. I do respect your opinions. Just came new to me a few months ago, and I was in the study there. I would advise you to do the same if you're interested in it. If you are both asking freedom about where it is on the market and they want to investigate this. Discrimination by place of residence. This is for the pregnancy. Pregnancies occur within the first few weeks of pregnancy. The pregnancy, what will happen is the child will embed himself in the fallopian tube. Most of the time there is a hemorrhaging action that necessitates the emergency operation and the removal of the tube completely. By the time most surgery is done, the developing baby has already died from the hemorrhaging. Tubal pregnancies in the U.S. constitute a 0.5% of all pregnancies, but after one abortion, it rises to 3.9%. This is a spontaneous abortion. It's natural. In this case, the growing baby usually dies because of either abnormalities in himself or in the placenta, his life support system. A non-aborted woman, 7.5%. Have a chance of having a miscarriage. If you've had one abortion, it's 17.5%. And 2 abortions, it goes right on up. This was part of the big discussion from 67 to 73 in front of the U.S. Supreme Court. The mortality rate, Dr. Nathan sent it to before the court, and he said upwards of 10,000 women were dying yearly in back-alley abortion. Sex education welfare says it's not quite clear that it really didn't matter. It did display the public opinion on it. The public still believes it's a great deal. Actually, the year before, you can see down the bottom, as you tell me there, 70 women had died from illegal abortion in 1972. In 1978, 50 women died from legal abortion. Drastically, it has not reduced, and like I say, Dr. Nathanson admitted in 1977 he came over to the pro-life movement side, National Right to Life, and he admitted that he perjured himself in front of the court. So he deliberately lied for the purpose of killing the public. Actually, penicillin is what brought down the death, because of infection is the most common reason for death in abortion. And penicillin also took care of gonorrhea and syphilis and other types of venereal diseases fairly well at the time, which I believe caused a lot of promiscuous activity from that on. Before that, people were just a little scared. Legal abortion cannot solve the problems that it was supposed to. Illegal abortion cannot cease. There has been, since 1973, a 130-fold increase in legal abortion and only a 4-fold decrease in illegal abortion. The reason for that is that illegal abortion still provide no records, they provide strict arrangements, lower costs, and total anonymity. Now, it could be said, Ray Johnson, you like this, it could be said that, well, we can't stop the people from having abortions anyhow, so let's go ahead and legalize it. We can't stop them from stealing cars either. I'm sorry, we can't do it, so let's legalize it. Would you like to legalize car theft? Ray Johnson says no, anyhow. You didn't know he lost his car, people. So let's use the same argument. We can't stop it, so let's just go right ahead and legalize it. Let's make it legal. You can't stop a rape. Can't stop a rapist. Let's give him some federal funding. Let's get him into a nice hotel room where there won't be any danger. It's as ignorant as an argument as saying you can't stop kids either. You can't stop the killing of children, so let's make it legal. It's a stupid argument. Okay. Handicap. Mental and physical handicap. There's a certain ethic involved here. Before birth or after birth, what's the difference? I'm going to tell you, some scientists and some of our doctors don't believe there's any difference. Same patient, same handicap. Where do we draw the line? We said we really have to draw a line on it. Life is to be lived. You know, God intended to create life. Satan intended to create death. And we need to decide whose side we're going to be on for this. Genetic handicaps are assumed, of course, to enjoy life less, hence a right not to be born. The American Pathological Association, 1971, stated, handicapped children enjoy life as much as any normal child does. You've ever seen a Special Olympics or work in a home for retarded children? You will understand what I'm saying. They feel frustration. They feel happiness. They love to be loved. They hate to be hated. I'm sorry, they feel every emotion that you do. Because you're down at McDonald's and you can't stand to sit across from a retarded person that's having a problem with their eating habits or whatever because of physical or mental retardation. That's your problem. That's not their problem. Remember, God described, He prescribed. Now, I'm going to tell you something else. A lot of this is gone on by our own selves. Through drugs, through different types of methods like that. Drug abuse and a lot of organic brain damage is caused by that. And I believe it was ever God's intention that way. Aborting genetic handicaps moves us a step closer to a biological society. Exactly what Hitler wanted to do. He wanted to have a biological society. And humanists want to do that too. Joseph Fletcher, leader of the euthanasia movement in America, who's also involved with the National Education Association, has proposed that defective children be destroyed, even against the parents' wishes. Dr. James Watson, a researcher funded by Marshall Downs, the people who try to help all the invalids, has proposed that children not be declared alive until 3 days after birth, then parents could be allowed a choice after genetic testing is performed. Since 1971, genetic handicaps after normal birth have been allowed to die. The courts consider this mercy killing. because of all the suffering they'll go through. In 1971 at Johns Hopkins Hospital, a baby was born with an intestinal blockage that meant he could not be nursed. When his parents learned that he also had Down syndrome, they refused to permit the relatively minor operation that would have corrected the internal condition. So the baby was wheeled to an out-of-the-way corner, where he died of starvation and dehydration 15 days later. That's probably a record of being able to go that long without food and water. A couple of years ago, up here in Indiana, Bloomington, Indiana, baby Doe was left to die. Incidentally, President Reagan signed into law last year in December under the Child Abuse Act. Legally, they're not going to be able to do this anymore. They're not going to be able to allow children that are born in a natural vaginal delivery to die. This is another one of the emotional issues. Assault rate. It's almost non-existent. In one reporting year, there were 15 rapes that resulted in pregnancy. 1 out of every 1,600 women in the U.S. are raped yearly. That's horrible. The low rates in rape pregnancy is one of 3 reasons, possibly one of 3 reasons. The occurrence of conception from any single act of intercourse is placed at 2 to 4%. Trauma associated with sexual assault is likely to inhibit ovulation. And 3, a high incidence of sexual dysfunction among sexual assailants is well documented. Now, there are no statistics that prove that rape is a good reason to have a law for abortion on demand. If, in a couple of 3 studies that I have, all of them show that women that were assault raped, if they went to the emergency room, there was 0% chance of being pregnant. Jane Roe was raped by 3 men, a black man, a white man, and a mulatto. She never reported it. Hence, she turned up pregnant. The problem with making a law that says if you're raped, you can have an abortion, is that everybody would say they had a rape, had been raped. That ended up pregnant but didn't want to be, and you'd have abortion on demand again. For those that are willing to break the law anyhow. A law, you have to have proof and witnesses. Okay, they swab them out with a chemical which kills the sperm cell. And again, that's generic law. That's not an independent law at the time. So if in chance they could even become pregnant at the time because of the other factors involved. No, it takes a while. The sperm has to crawl up through the mucus plug and into the cervix and up into the fallopian tube to even fertilize. We're not talking about waiting 3 days. I'm talking about when it's done, you're going as quick as you can. Okay, like I say, there's no statistics that sort of favor abortion for rape, only from emotional appeal. Incest, let me touch it for a minute. In 1 year, we had 18 cases of incest, one reporting year. The age of the girl was not 13 or 14, but she was 17 years old. That's the average age in 18 cases in 1 year. 12 of those cases were brother and sister relationships. 6 were father and daughter relationships. To get to the crux of the matter, incest is child abuse. It's abuse. Abortion is never a treatment for incest. And this is why. It will allow for easy disposal of evidence that will hide and subject the child to continued abuse. If you can walk in down here at Planned Parenthood and say, I want an abortion, fine. In the old days, it didn't work that way. It also hinders the prosecution and covers up the crime. It doesn't provide any good. Here's a question for you. Should we kill an innocent baby for the crime of his father? If I commit a crime, should my son have to die for what I did? You capital punishment people here. Incidentally, I'm not promoting capital punishment. I don't want to start another controversy. I'm not. Okay. The child in this case is no less innocent than the mother. Our judicial system is based on punishment for the criminal, not the victim. Okay, hang on just a second and I'll be right to you. The intent, now listen to me here, the intent in the act of the intercourse does not alter the value of the baby's life. The intent isn't what's important here. The fact that God created in the womb is the importance. That is the value of life. The degradation, shame, and emotional disruption in bearing the child is not the moral equivalent of life. If it's involved in the church, I would hope the church would help the person and not help spread shame and degradation on him for something like rape or incest. Yes, sir. Sure. Very happy. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. The reason for that is because the psychological damage, you may be causing that girl in the future to commit suicide because now you're going to place on her an ethic involved with taking a life. You may never get over that. You don't know how psychological problems are going to end up in the future. If she wants to adopt the baby out or whatever, that's fine. I mean, okay, that's fine. But absolutely, she could carry the baby to term. She'll have less psychological problems in the long run. Okay, let me go on here because we got a long way and the bell rings. Please hang with me for a minute until I finish this. I'm going to flip through some of these prayer tasks. We've only got 15 minutes left. This is one that everybody likes. Every child a wanted child. This happens to be a Planned Parenthood slogan. It would be nice if it was true. Unfortunately, it's kind of a ghastly ethic when we think about if there's somebody in our society, a child in our society we don't want, we can kill him. Wanted or unwanted is the only consideration that's needed to abort one child or keep another. Every child happens to be a wanted child. It's a myth to believe that they're not. There's 800,000 people right now on rolls so they can adopt here in the U.S. that are cleared, ready to go to adopt children. The total numbers of babies last year available was 100,000. Some people have been on waiting lists up to 11 years just to get a child to adopt. They cannot have children. Children are wanted. If you don't believe that, try the black market. And not just for the sake of having a child in your home. Black market slavery is also a big thing now with children. There are children that are sold here in Houston that have been reported in the paper that have been going down to Mexico and slave markets, have been sent off to prostitution rings. Babies are worth something. Somebody wants them. I'm not trying to say that that's the good reasons behind it. I'm telling you that's drastically the increase in black market babies have went up. And that's a deterioration of our society. I'd prefer to stay with 800,000 couples that want to adopt. Some people say unwanted pregnancy equals an unwanted child. There's no statistics that will prove it in our country or in any other country. No studies exist. And we get down to the crux of the matter again. Unwanted pregnancies equal the same amount of percentage that they've done studies on this to show that the same percentage of wanted babies after birth. Sometimes pregnancy may occur at a time when it's inconvenient. But we're in a throwaway society. We can just throw it away. We don't want it. Without any responsibility whatsoever. And this is the pro-abortion rhetoric that unwanted pregnancy causes unwantedness of a child who now becomes a battered child. And I want you to listen to me closely because people say this all the time. But Dr. Edward Leonowski, professor of pediatrics, University of Southern California at Santa Barbara, studied over 600 successive cases. He concluded 90% of the battered children were wanted. And 91% of them were legitimate children also. 90% of them were wanted pregnancies. The mothers wore the pregnancy clothes 2 months earlier than the national average. The fathers, in 24% of the cases, the fathers made the sons after themselves. They were wanted, but sometimes selfish reasons cause things that we see here in battered children. Of course, we can always turn to the U.S. figures for child abuse since 1973, since they've adopted the abortion on demand law. That could have reduced our figures, but we see a 500% increase in child abuse since 1973. Japan has a national epidemic. They have used abortion for 20 years on demand over there. They have infanticide, the killing of born infants up to 2 years old, is a national epidemic in Japan. Another study by Schofield and Barker reports women who have had abortions abuse their children at higher rates than women who have never had an abortion. The statistics don't go along with the reasoning. To be concerned that a child might be abused and presume death is less abusive is humanism. Dr. May, he's a psychiatrist from University of British Columbia, states that what war, pestilence, and famine could not do to us, medicine in the name of humanism might yet achieve. There's nothing wrong with medicine. There's nothing wrong with the medical field as a whole. There is something wrong with some people in the medical field. The majority of the medical field does not go along with some of the things that I have said and shown you here today. I don't want you to think that you can't trust the doctor from now on, because you can. But you need to also be aware that some people promote ethics and lifestyles that you would not go along with. Just to look into the future a little bit, we don't have to look very far. Dr. Lawrence Lawn here, he purchases babies from an abortion clinic. Well, he purchases from a hospital. That hanging in the left-hand corner there is a baby. He does tests. He injects drugs on that aborted child. That is a live aborted child. Ferraro was a big backer of this. Planned Parenthood is a big backer of this. And you may have inadvertently also backed it. Planned Parenthood in 1980 received contributions from the United Way chapters and $69.7 million paid by the U.S. taxpayer. Some of it's abortion clinics, and some of it's human experimentation. Now, there is a law in the books against some human experimentation. And incidentally, Reagan just cut out last year all of Planned Parenthood funding. So they don't get nothing more. Last week when we were out at KJLJ, Rodney and I were doing a show out there, and his boss came to us and gave us a thing just come off the teletype that showed President Reagan just allotted over $1 million to birthright, another group that provide help for people to have children instead of abort. And President Reagan's in hot water at Congress. The bell's going to ring very soon. Are you able to hang with me, or do you have to go? Okay, I'm going to go on. If you have to go, feel free to get up and go. Maybe 15 minutes at the most, if I can work it. Okay, let me give you this. Last year, a psychiatrist and anthropologist, Virginia Abernathy from Vanderbilt University School of Medicine, states, as long as an individual is completely dependent upon the mother, it's not a person. In this view, which is shared by other pro-choice theorists, an individual becomes a person only when he or she becomes a responsible moral agent, around the age 3 or 4. In Abernathy's judgment, now listen, she is the psychiatrist there at Vanderbilt. In her judgment, until then, she thinks infants, like fetuses, are non-persons. Defective children, such as those with Down syndrome, may never become persons. The claim they have on persons, she says, is compassion, not a moral right to life. Compassion is always very important, but it loses when weighed against the rights of a person. I've got a couple other, I'm not going to read, but it's by Nobel laureates, people that we esteem. And certainly they believe that children should not be allowed into for genetic purposes, should not be allowed personhood. Go a little further. I'm going to draw a couple parallels here. Evidence produced during the Nuremberg war crime trials clearly established that the general society in Germany had accepted the rule that particular classes of people could be killed for the good of society. Hitler didn't originate abortion, and he didn't originate euthanasia. He took over on a foundation that had already been laid by the medical society in Germany. As early as 1920s, they began eliminating people in their society. The criteria that they had laid down allowed for euthanasia. They began killing German citizens, Aryans, not Jews, and they started by killing the retarded, the mentally ill. Then the criteria allowed for the killing of the terminally ill and the elderly. Next step was the purification of the Aryan race, which included all the bedwetters, those difficult to educate, and those with imperfect features such as poorly formed ears. And they killed 275,000 Germans before they ever went into the Jewish Holocaust. And incidentally, the church was strong at the time in Germany, the church that was in existence there, the faith and belief, and they tolerated the entire thing because they didn't speak out. And humanists were like us and believed that we would do the same thing. Primarily Lutherans, and there was, at the time, some of the Catholic priests did have to go into the concentration camps because they did speak out against it. This is just lost one of my papers here, but what it is. Belsen concentration camp. This is one gas load of Jews, gas chamber load of Jews. Once we devalue life, we cannot really ever stop that line being drawn. You devalue it, it's going to continue on. It perpetuates itself. It took about Germany just about 20 years to reach the point where they could justify the extermination of 6 million minority citizens. Now this is interesting. Delegates of the German Medical Association voted 98% against abortion on demand. When asked why they voted against abortion, Dr. Ernst stated, because we've been through this once before and we know where it will lead to. Germans, let me go back there, find my paper. Germans did not murder the elderly, the impaired, the infants, and their undesirable countrymen because they were Germans. Sometimes we get this bad feeling towards Germans. It was because they were humanists. The German rationale was humanism. We are less than 2 decades away from infanticide and euthanasia if we allow humanists to remain in control of our lives. Okay. We don't have to go to Germany to find out where this type of thing has happened before, an injustice to humanity. On March 6, 1857, the U.S. Supreme Court, in a landmark Dred Scott decision, ruled black people were not legal persons according to the U.S. Constitution. It took a war and 11 years before people were allowed to vote in to the Constitution, the 13th and 14th Amendments, which overturned the Supreme Court decision and established legal personhood for all living human beings. I've got a lot of material here. I'm going to have to skip it so we can go on, but this slavery and abortion, you'll see, runs a close parallel, including even in the decision of the Supreme Court. Both were Supreme Court decisions. Both were 72 decisions. One, black persons were considered non-persons, and then, of course, the unborn are non-persons because of a Supreme Court decision. Property of the owner, both, of course, the property of the owner both have the right to choose to buy, sell, or kill, or to keep or kill. And you see the one there on the abolitionists did not impose morality on the slave owner. You don't have to own a slave. And of course, they say the same thing about fundamental Christians and pro-lifers who say that, they say we don't have the right to impose our morality on them. Slavery is legal and abortion is legal. Just because it's legal doesn't make it right. The difference here between the anti-slavery and the pro-slavery and the pro-abortion and the anti-abortion or the pro-life movement is that the president is now on the other side. And other than that, you'll see it runs very close correlation. Euthanasia. We will draw a parallel because the same logic that's used to say that you can have abortion can just as easily be used for euthanasia. AIDS. Child in the womb is too young. Grandma, of course, is too old. Wantedness, both become unwanted. In our society, it's becoming more current that that older people become unwanted by the families because of the deterioration of the family itself. Place of residence, in the womb or the nursing home. We're going to be allowed, at some point, they would want to allow euthanasia for nursing home. Intelligence, not yet conscious, no longer conscious, senile. Same ethics. The cost, was too poor to keep people in the old folks' home. Degree of perfection, the handicap, both are handicapped. Numbers, too many children, too many old folks, and we'll show you in a minute, and we'll get to it very quickly so I can get this thing ended. Marital status, unmarried, widowed, usefulness, a burden to both, of course, that's the way society looks at it, and the Supreme Court decision for meaningful life, not yet reached, no longer has. There's been over 30 euthanasia bills promoted, and I want to read one of those to you very quickly when I find it. We'll just go on here for a minute. Population explosion, of course, is a lie. 25 to 44-year-old group, by the year 2000, over 50% of the people in the United States, over half the people in the United States will be over 50 years old. In 1980, there was 1,500,000 fewer third graders than there had been in our schools in the previous years. That creates the problem here. We're not replacing our own population. We are an aging, dying nation. This is how the criteria is going to be involved. What they're going to say is that now we have 4 wage earners supporting every retired person on Social Security through taxes. In 40 years, there will only be 2 wage earners supporting every retired person. What are we going to do? Who's going to support the old folks? Let's go to the ethics and the logic and the criteria. Let's eliminate some of those old, meaningless folks that are seen now in nursing homes. Very easily, solutions could be drawn from this. Remove the legal protection of 85-year-olds, 65-year-olds on down. The ethic, the logic, and the morality have already been established in the law. The new ethic produces a biological society. Humanism promotes selective society philosophies. The family is under attack. We need to come to that decision. What humanism wants is more abortion, more infanticide, more euthanasia, more artificial insemination, more test-tube babies, single parenthood, homosexuality, lesbianism, women's liberation. They're all anti-family and anti-God. The advocates of euthanasia are becoming increasingly vocal in medical and governmental circles. I've read some of those to you. In April of 1984, Governor Dick Lamb of Colorado suggested that the terminally ill elderly have a duty to die and get out of the way. Lamb argued that the savings in health care could be put into restarting America's industrial engine. The state is trying to take power. You just can't kill the adults. Hitler found that out. It's easier to kill the unborn. Humanism tells us to reduce the number, and that we're going to reduce the number, as we reduce the number of people, we're going to reduce the number of poor and afflicted in our society. Poverty, folks, do not accept abortion. Incidentally, the American Indian movement, many of the black movements, the minorities in our country do not accept abortion. You know who accepts it? White middle class. He accepts it. Next segment of slides. Next segment of slides is going to be some pictures of baby, and then I'm just going to ask you to look and to think about it. Faith on which side of the issue we're on. I don't believe you can stay neutral. Some people believe it. You pray on it. You see if you get a conviction on it. You're dismissed.